You mentioned NFL body. My ears perked up there for one reason. Devonta Smith. Does he have an NFL body? Does that concern you at all?
Well, I would say not yet. Look, I was at the national championship game, Alabama, Ohio State, and I was going to the stadium thinking that could Justin Fields close the gap and maybe work himself into that conversation because he played so well the week before. I left the stadium saying like the best football player on that field was Devonta Smith. Just in terms of Ohio State knew he was getting the ball and they still couldn't cover him.
Mac and Mac guys here with you on Birds 365. Appreciate you dropping in. Look who's dropping in with us. Now, when I used to have my shows on up in New York, I used to call him Mr. T. He still doesn't have the prerequisite mullet that's right down the middle of the hair. But I will call him Mr. T just the same. Former Jets general manager, Dolphins general manager, contributor for ESPN, and now writer as well for the 33rdteam.com. Mike Tannenbaum joins us here on Birds 365. How are you, Mr. T?
Good morning, guys. Great to be with you. How's it going?
It's going well. I want you to thank you for joining the show, Mike. I guess we got to start with Julio Jones since that's the biggest move in the NFL, expected in some degree. But as a former GM, I do want to get your thoughts on this whole sort of, I don't want to call it a theme in the league, but the mentality of a, first ballot Hall of Fame player, but he's 32. The adage is you don't pay age in this league. Talk about the value, second round pick versus proven aging player, why that comes down from a potential first round pick.
Yeah, it's a great question. Branch Rickey probably said it best back in the 1950s running the Dodgers in baseball, which is you rather trade a player too soon, too late. Great example of it was actually same team, same position. A couple of years ago, the Falcons traded Mohamed Sanu to the Patriots for a second round pick. And I think that's one of those moves that Coach Belichick candidly probably would like to have back. You have to be really disciplined about when you pay a player or trade for a player that you want to make sure that you're paying them for what they're going to do, not for what they've done. I've made that mistake in the past. It's really easy to do that, considering what the brand name potentially is with Julio Jones, but he's a great player. But I believe he's only played a full season once in the last 3 years. And I think that's why at the end of the day, that's what the market was. And there's about $17 million in guaranteed money. And that's obviously a factor as well.
Mike, I want to put you in the Falcons general manager's shoes leading up to what happened yesterday. You've got a lot of people in your ear when you're dealing with something like this. You've got the player who's making demands and saying, I don't want to be here anymore. You've got your coach who's deciding whether he thinks Julio Jones is going to help him win games. New coach, as a matter of fact, wants to make a good first impression. He'd probably like to keep the talented player around. You got the owner who's involved in Arthur Blank, very well reported. He thought they could get a first-round pick. Then you got the fan base telling you, here's exactly what we should do. Our Falcons need this. How do you keep all those ducks in a row? How do you make sure that you're doing what's best? Because you make that decision, not because everyone else is throwing an opinion on your way about how you're going to handle this player in this deal.
Yeah, it's easy. Jody Mack, when you have the privilege of one of these jobs, it's a one-sentence job description. The way I viewed it was, you're the point guard of information. You sit between the head coach and the owner, and given all the complexities and certainly all the noise that you just enumerated, it's a great example of what that means, which is you get in the room with the head coach and the owner and say, all right, here's the deal. If we keep Julio Jones, here's what it looks like the next couple of years from a cap, cash, roster standpoint. If we have him, here's the 4 things we can't do. So when we're sitting here and we need another corner, our starting corner is our first-round pick in April of 2022. So it doesn't matter if Deacon Jones is available. Once we make the decision that we're keeping Julio Jones, here's what it's going to have to look like. And everything else is just noise. The bloggers, the fans, the media, if you could keep those 2 people on the same page, you have a chance. And I think that's one of the reasons we had a great run. When I look back in New York, being there for 16 years, try to simplify things, but, be it if it was Rex Ryan, Eric Mangini, whoever the head coach was, but hey, can we stay on the same page? make the best decision for the franchise, and then move on. And I used to actually welcome the attention from this standpoint, guys. I worked in obviously two big media markets between New York and Miami, but I wanted the attention. I wanted them talking about the Jets or the Dolphins, because if they're talking about the MLS team or, the whatever, like it's a privilege to run an NFL team, and you want eyeballs on you. That's what drives the sport's popularity.
Mike, I do want to take it locally with Zach Ertz, and obviously you're very familiar with Howie Roseman. When you have a franchise legend, I don't know any other way to describe Zach, but obviously he probably doesn't have the value that the Eagles would like on the open market because of what we just talked about, age, coming off some injuries, coming off a down season. How do you sort of weigh the fact? I think everybody knows the Eagles are going to move on at some point. How do you weigh the fact that when to cut bait? Do you look at your locker room? Do you look at the other players and they say, look at how they're handling this Zach Ertz situation? How difficult can that be?
I would give Zach Ertz the same speech I would give Jimmy Garoppolo, which is, look, it's probably in everyone's best interest for you to be on this team this year. Now, look, we got Trey Lance or Dallas Goedert, and they are the future, and I'd be bullshitting you if I said otherwise. With that said, this is an investment for both of us. The better you play and the better the team is, the more money it's going to put in your pocket next March, and the better we're going to do this year. So give us everything you got this year. You're a pro. We're going to honor your contract. We want you to be the same Zach Ertz or Jimmy Garoppolo. And at the end of the year, we'll sit down shoulder to shoulder, and we'll figure out a great resolution for everybody. But I need you to come in every day with energy, professionalism, and we're going to get through this year. And if you don't handle it that way, while you think you're just being mad at us, I promise you the 31 other GMs and teams are going to look at you, and they're going to say to themselves, like, why do we want to bring a jerk into our locker room? So just be careful of how you handle yourself.
All right, Mike, need your general manager opinion here. We know that the Julio Jones trade just came down, had to settle for a second plus exchange of 2 other draft picks. Don't know if it's ever going to get to this, but certainly there's been enough conversation about Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. If the Packers decide, listen, this has just gotten too ugly and we need to move on, Love continues to show well in whatever practices they're having in Green Bay, and they go, it's time to cut the cord, we need to start the next era of the Green Bay Packers. If you were a general manager who had a need at quarterback and thought Aaron Rodgers was the difference in making a Super Bowl run this year, what kind of value does he have on the open market? What could the Packers expect in return for Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, Joey Mack, it's easy. I don't let Green Bay off the phone. Like, I would get the deal done. And here's why. If we could sit here and say, hey, it's worth maybe 2 1s, if you have to give up a third first-round pick, and that pick's somewhere between, call it 18 and 32, and over time that has a 55 to 58% chance of being a contributing player, when you have a first ballot Hall of Famer who may get you the Super Bowl. Like, if Aaron Rodgers was on the Denver Broncos, they're probably the favorites to go to the Super Bowl for the AFC. They go in front of Tennessee and Kansas City. It's a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. Like, you're trying to draft Aaron Rodgers. And in this day and age, given his athleticism, lower body flexibility, and his diet and fitness, I think you could get reasonably, 4 to 5 years at a high level. So if I'm another team, I just don't get him off the phone. I get the deal done, whatever it takes.
Hey, Mike, speaking of off-season work, I want to get your thought process from mandatory minicamp. Some teams are having them. Green Bay, we're all interested. Aaron's probably not going to show up. It's going to be the $93,000 fine. Minnesota's got Danielle Hunter to deal with. We're going to see if he shows up. In other cities like Philadelphia here, they negotiated with the players. They scaled back, no mandatory work. As an executive, how would you have handled that? Would you try to have hold the line and say, look, we need this, especially with the new coaching staff, or is it not that important?
Yeah, context is everything. And I think we have to be sensitive to this, which is, I've been vaccinated. Most of the people I know have been, but not everybody has. And I don't know if you guys saw what happened yesterday with John Rahm, but he's leading
Yeah.
the Memorial Tournament by 6 strokes, and he tests positive. And it was interesting how they said it from a media perspective, which is while they can't say if he was vaccinated, what they can say is if you were vaccinated, you weren't being tested. So that leads you to the reasonable conclusion that he wasn't vaccinated. And because of that, I think this is a hard year to drive, hey, we need you here at minicamp. Now, with Nick Sirianni, of course, you want to have as many reps as humanly possible for Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts to be on the same page. But, we're still dealing with a very insidious virus. We're still seeing positive tests. So I think this is a year where you can encourage, you can sort of gently try to persuade people. But I think you have to be very respectful that this is a very unique pandemic. We're probably, at the 1 yard line, almost done with it. But until we're there, I think it's hard to say, hey, we need you here because, again, it's a personal choice and not everyone's vaccinated as of today.
That leads perfectly into my next question. Let's say you as a general manager and you as an organization and you have enough conversations with your boss, the owner, the other people that work with you or under you. As an organization, you believe the vaccination is the way to go. While acknowledging it's a personal choice for everyone, the NFL has put legislation in that if you've got 85% vaccination, you can lessen your protocols, which will make it easier for you to run your organization. How do you get that message out that here's what the Eagles think without stepping on people's toes, without force feeding anyone's actions? You do have a big hammer, at least with a percentage of your roster. 2 guys really close. One's vaccinated, one's not. Guess who's making the team? The vaccinated guy. How do you let that be known in the locker room without coming right out and saying, yeah, you want to make the team, best shot, get your vaccination now. You got to be very careful. How do you pull that off?
I think education. I'd be like most things sitting in that seat. You want to be a good listener. If you're not getting vaccinated, I'd like to know why. What are the concerns? Can we help you, work through that? It's a personal choice. So I know Brandon Bean, the GM of Bills, was recently criticized for making comments along those lines. But I think like anything else, Jody Mack, you want to give them as much information as possible.
So, Mike, if you are Brandon Bean and he got in a little hot water for saying he might cut a player who wasn't vaccinated versus a player who was, you have this CBA with the union. You can't force the players to get vaccinated. From Roger Goodell's standpoint, it's a sticky wicket. Is there any other aspect in education you can go down? Because it's impossible to get the union to agree to get everyone tested.
Yeah. Again, I think this is where you need a healthy relationship with the Players Association because it's in everyone's best interest to have a full season, to have as many healthy players. It helps revenue. It helps with player health and safety. So to me, if I'm, the commissioner, I'm working with D. Smith, the executive director of the NFLPA, and saying, hey, we're teammates on this issue. Like, there's time and places where we're going to butt heads, and that's healthy and natural in a collectively bargained relationship. But right now, we're on the same side of the table, and we need as many players as possible that are to get vaccinated because just like the expenses alone, that comes off of the money that's going to be shared by the players. So we want to make that pot of money as big as possible for everybody. So let's work together on this.
Mike, I maybe asked you this question previously when I had you on a different show. If I do, I forget, so I need to ask it again. Your thought process on, as a general manager, hiring a college coach, that there have been some who have had success, many more who had failures. Really interesting storyline in the NFL this year is going to be Urban Meyer taking over Jacksonville. I think the quarterback that he got is going to make them a better team just by showing up, but he's going to do things the way he wants to do them in Jacksonville. I think we've already seen that. He's got a big power base. What is your general opinion on college coaches making the transformation to the NFL? Does it work? Can it work? Is it doomed for failure?
it can work. It's not easy. Nick Saban, arguably one of the greatest college head coaches of all time, was under 500. There's going to be a big learning curve. This is going to test the mindset of Urban Meyer. What I mean by that, like, is it fixed or is it growth? Like, does he realize he doesn't have all the answers? And there's going to be some, we're going to, if you guys have me on in the fall, there's going to be some time like, how come he didn't throw that challenge flag? Or why is this player still on IR? Like, there's a learning curve. And it's not going to happen overnight. And that's something that I think he has a chance. He was successful at Bowling Green. He was successful at Utah, certainly Florida and Ohio State. But this won't happen overnight.
Mike, and I want to encourage everybody, Mike Tannenbaum, ex-Jets GM, former Dolphins exec, the 33rdteam.com. You guys call it the think tank. I love it. I think it's one of the best NFL websites out there. Mike's got Joe Banner, ex-Eagles president, a lot of guys writing for the site. But I do want to talk about, because we are in Philadelphia, Mike, you're one of the guys who got Howie Roseman started. Joe's one of the guys. Can you kind of tell us the background of Howie Roseman, how he came to be in your eyes and Joe's eyes, and sort of come on this journey from intern to one of the NFL's most respected general managers?
Sure. At the time, I think I was like the pro personnel director of the Jets. I may have been the assistant GM at that point, but I had this young guy who was very persistent, wouldn't take no for an answer. Met with him a couple times. We didn't have any openings. He was at Fordham Law School and had a good relationship with Joe Banner, and suggested that to Joe that, we have this young dynamic guy that's hardworking, dying to get involved in football. We have no openings, but I don't think you would find it a waste of time to say hello to him. The rest is really history. Like, I can't take any credit for all the successes he's had. He's done a great job. I like stories like that where people start at the bottom, take no shortcuts. There's a lot of nepotism in our profession, which is either fair or unfair. But there is. And, Howie's one of those guys that's like bucked every trend and, took no shortcuts and worked his way to the top.
Mike, I always give you credit when you were running the Jets because I'm a New York guy and was a Jet fan. Growing up, still am, season ticket holder. I thought you were one of the best capologists in the NFL during your time with the Jets. It's trickier this year than it's been in a long time because no one saw the pandemic coming and the NFL actually taking a step backwards as far as the size of their cap, but that is the case. Has anyone in your eyes done a better job handling it, positioning his team for this upcoming season and then the rebound season, if that's what it is? That's what I'm predicting it will be, as far as the cap going back up by leaps and bounds the year after. Who's done the best at keeping their team in the best cap position, in your opinion?
I think the Saints, from this standpoint, they just let a Hall of Famer retire in Drew Brees, and that comes with some massive dead money that they had a bill to pay. They had deferred some cap charges. They have a young quarterback in Jameis Winston who really may be a great quarterback for a long time. Their backgrounds between Drew Brees and Jameis Winston, while aren't completely the same, are somewhat interesting in terms of Drew Brees had some mixed success in San Diego before he moved on, hurt his shoulder, was franchised, Phillip Rivers. There was a holdout, but bottom line was the Chargers were not dying to keep Drew Brees. He went on, and obviously the rest is history. Jameis Winston's put some really good tape out there in Tampa Bay. Obviously, turnovers have been a huge, huge concern. With that said, if they could clean that up, he could get the ball down the field. He has really good arm strength, good accuracy. And if I'm the Saints and I could go from Drew Brees to potentially a good starter in Jameis Winston, that's great cap management, great roster management. They're not paying him a lot of money this year, and they still have a chance to be really successful.
Hey, Mike, you talked about Aaron Rodgers a little bit earlier. You wouldn't let Green Bay off the phone when you're talking about a Hall of Fame level player like that. I want to talk to you about young quarterbacks, and it seems that the NFL has gone in this direction where they will move on from a young quarterback a lot more quickly than they used to. And you've seen it. We've seen it with Carson Wentz, Jared Goff. You mentioned Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, guys at the top of the draft. How do you weigh sort of development of a quarterback versus deciding we have to cut Bates. In theory, Sam Bradford was the last so-called bonus baby under the old system. Wouldn't it be more intuitive to keep a quarterback because it's not as financially destructive as versus moving on with the dead money?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And I think one of the ways I was criticized in both the Jets and Dolphins, probably fairly so, was like being patient with young players. I just saw it firsthand in my career. I saw Chad Pennington sit for a couple of years and be successful. I got to Miami and everybody was ready to run Ryan Tannehill out of the building. And when he was healthy, we went to the playoffs. And then, they moved on from him after I left. And, he's played at a high level. The quarterback is a developmental position. And I think you got to err on the side of, holding on to a player. Now, I certainly don't know all the sort of like intricacies and intimate details of what happened with Carson Wentz, but clearly, both sides felt like a fresh start was necessary. But generally speaking, I agree. Holding on to a good young quarterback is certainly the way to go. We forget that, it's amazing to me when we drafted Mark Sanchez at the Jets, he had started 13 games the year before at SC, and people looked at us like we were crazy. Like, how can you draft such an inexperienced quarterback? Now, San Francisco trades up for, multiple first-round picks for a guy that played one game. The world's just changed. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is a guy that certainly should play this year. I was very critical of the Bengals a year ago. I thought that it made no sense to me whatsoever to trade Andy Dalton, or cut him. I would have made sure that he played, given Joe Burrow, not only time to get to know the playbook, but get his lower body bigger and stronger. I take no pride in the fact that I was one of a few other people that said, look, he has a real chance of getting hurt. His body, when you look at him, was not an NFL body. When you look at guys like Tom Brady and Ben Roethlisberger and Dak Prescott and Cam Newton, those are NFL quarterback bodies. They are built for the rigors of an NFL season. That does not happen overnight. And when you put these quarterbacks out there too soon, you're putting them into harm's way.
Very interesting. All right, Mike, as you just mentioned, Ryan Tannehill was your guy. Now he's going to benefit from Julio Jones. So you're not that far removed from being the man in charge of an NFL team, but it's been a couple of years. What do you miss the most? What aspect do you miss on a day in, day out basis that this used to be exciting and challenging and fun? And what's the one aspect you go, damn, if I never have to do that again, that's perfectly fine with me. Give me the yin and the yang of being a general manager as you see it now a couple of years removed.
The second part's the easy part, cutting a player. That was by far the hardest thing to do. Look, as you will imagine with my career, I've been on both sides of some really hard conversations, but letting somebody go, I always used to tell our staff on the day that we would cut players, which is like, we have a job to do, but shame on us as human beings if somewhere inside of us this isn't extraordinarily painful to cut whatever the number would be, 20, 25 players. So this is going to be a hard day for everybody, including us. And if it isn't, like, there's something wrong with you. Now, we have a job to do and we're going to do it, but it should bother us. Like, this should not be an easy day. In terms of what do I miss, it was really more of the intangible of walking in every day, everybody having the same jersey on, trying to accomplish something greater than ourselves, and obviously the 30 to 45 seconds after the game, after a win, there was nothing like it. And my personality certainly was like, it was a blessing and a curse, because it literally was like 45 to 50 seconds of like joy, because then after that it was like, all right, what's next? What's the next problem? Like, who got hurt? What are we dealing with? Who's upset about their contract? Who has the wrong title on their staff? Like, what's the complaint today? And that can wear on you. But you have to understand that's when you have the privilege of these jobs, you have to embrace that. But there's nothing like a win. It's intoxicating.
Last one from me, Mike. Everybody go to the 33rd team.com. Mike Tannenbaum, ex-GM of the Jets, ex-executive of the Dolphins. You mentioned NFL body. My ears perked up there for one reason, Devonta Smith. Does he have an NFL body? Does that concern you at all?
Well, I would say not yet. look, I was at the national championship game, Alabama, Ohio State, and I was going to the stadium thinking that could Justin Fields close the gap and maybe, work himself into that conversation because he played so well the week before. I left the stadium saying like the best football player on that field was Devonta Smith. Just in terms of Ohio State knew he was getting the ball and they still couldn't cover him. For years at the Jets, we tried to cover Marvin Harrison, and we knew the 3 routes that he would run. It looked like if there was a strong wind, he'd fall over, and we still couldn't cover him. So I guess the point is that would be a concern, but he certainly has time to grow into it, and he has like incredible intangibles and work ethic that when you look at the production and the person, you're betting on the next 10 years. So I'm sure they have a detailed plan to work on that. But what really impressed me about him, again, was like Ohio State went to the stadium saying, like, we're not going to let Devonta Smith beat us, and he did.
200 and change yards in the first half before you hurt his thumb. Yeah, I'd say he kind of beat him. But along those lines, since you went there, Justin Fields, he has an NFL body. I've seen him. He looks like he can take the rigors of playing quarterback in the NFL. We saw the big game against Clemson, then the championship against Alabama. I would say it was more the defense's fault from not stopping Devonta Smith than it was Justin Fields. What was your final estimation heading into the draft as what kind of an NFL quarterback Justin Fields is going to be?
Jody Mack, he kind of went where I thought. I liked him. I was actually at his first practice when he transferred to Ohio State from Georgia. And he goes right by me on the sideline. And the only thing I can think of is like, Jacob Fromm must be Superman. And that's the guy at Georgia that beat him out. Because when you look at Justin Fields, like he looks like Cam Newton. I mean, he is really well built. There were a couple games in the end, Northwestern. I didn't think he played well, but I like him a lot. I thought, it's a remarkable. This is what's so great about the league is, if the 3 of us were having this conversation in February, and we said, if we had to raise our children based on the quarterback room of the Bears or the Packers, the 3 of us wouldn't blink and say, oh, we're going to take the Green Bay Packers. Now, I'm not so sure I wouldn't say for the next 10 years right now, I'd rather have Chicago's situation than Green Bay's, because I think if I was a betting man, I think Justin Fields has a chance to be a better long-term pro than Jordan Love. And that's really, sort of the comparison right now.
We shall see. Mike, we appreciate it greatly. You're up and on with us today. Now that we've got your email address and we can reach out, we're planning on doing so. We're going to get you out here during the season, leading up to the season and during the season as well. Best of luck with the new website. We'll be watching you on ESPN. Thank you very much, Mr. T.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Mike Tannenbaum here with us on Birds 365. All right. We got to take our final timeout. Come back. Couple things that he said. I want to run by Johnny Mack. 3, not 1, not 2, 3 ones for Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
It's a general manager talking. He might know better than McMullen and McDonald. We'll come back, chop it up with you here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.